Hello, everybody. It's Seamus Coughlin. Today I'm interviewing the great Thomas Kaye. Sorry, I'm trying to pronounce it properly. Who is the author behind the phenomenal George Ought to Help video. He is a fellow animator and a fellow liberty activist, so I'm very excited to have him here. Thomas, if you'd like to wrap yourself in, give a little bit of background to the audience.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Thomasz Kaye. I am based in the Netherlands right now. I made the animation Jojo to Help and two follow-ups to that, of which You Can Always Leave is the most recent. I'm busy making videos that I hope fill some kind of a gap that exists in liberty activism where great ideas are not as often as they could be paired with graphics that are seductive enough, in my view. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, great ideas paired with great videos, and honestly I think you're doing a great job with that. George Ought to Help.
Thank you.
I saw a pretty long time ago, actually. I saw that the first time. You said that was released like 2010, right? If I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yeah, so I remember seeing that a while ago when I was first being introduced to the Liberty Movement and just thinking, wow, this is a really great animation. And then later on, I would come across some of your other work, and I noticed a couple weeks ago, actually, that you had commented on a video that I made about net neutrality, and I was like, oh my god, this guy's huge. I love his work, and he saw my video, so that was actually really exciting for me, and that's when I started talking to you and told you that we should, that I should interview you for the podcast, and like I said, yeah, I'm glad you agreed to, but I think it's very good that there's other creative people in the libertarian movement trying to express our ideas in a creative fashion. I noticed that a lot of podcasting has been going on with the liberty movement, especially on the Voluntary Virtues Network, if you're familiar with that. But sometimes people don't want to listen to someone talk for 2 hours, They want to see a little animated video to compress the ideas into something far more consumable that they can pass along. And that's basically been my inspiration for making animated videos about liberty. What was yours?
Yeah, pretty much something very similar. Like there's something I think libertarians in general tend to. It's a generalization, but I think there's a lot of truth behind it. They tend to be very cerebral, analytical, and I think traditionally people with kind of liberal-leaning, left-leaning people have had a kind of monopoly on the kind of educational and institutional background that makes them good at visualizing stuff.
Yeah.
Like the best. I mean, disproportionately, people who are good at that kind of stuff tend to be left-leaning, I believe.
No, I agree with you.
And yeah, so I think the ones of us who have some skill in that area, who think differently, have maybe there's more of a burden that we should feel to do something about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Finish your thought. I didn't.
No, I was just going to reflect on the few animations of yours that I've seen, and I think what's really nice about those ones is this. They're very funny. I think that's also a really important thing that's often missing, and something that I don't feel that I'm particularly good at in what I do. I try to aim mine in a slightly different direction, but I think that's also something that's often lacking in liberty-minded people's productions. So I'm glad to see that you're busy with that too.
Oh, thank you very much. And I have to say, I thought your videos were pretty funny too. I thought that it was a little more of a subtle humor. Every single time when he goes, "You'll get a beating," and I can't remember which video that was from. Was that from George Ought to Help? No, that was from the one that's from You Can Always Leave, right? Where they're on the island and yeah, that every single time that killed me. And so it was like a far more subtle humor, I think, but yours are definitely very comedic. And I think another difference is your videos feel way more designed. When I put mine together, I kind of just, because, I have other professional work that I'm doing, and I have like a children's film I'm working on producing, and so even though I love doing this, it has kind of been a side thing for me. So it's been like, I'll just throw it together in whatever style like looks passable, but where I can get it done quickly. Whereas I feel like your stuff, looks like more time is going into it. Definitely, your stuff feels like there's more of a graphic designing mind behind it too. I think that I just throw together these funny little cartoon characters, whereas with yours, there's more of an intricate design theme to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's maybe true. I guess I'm thinking a lot about what kind of thing. Well, I guess I'm thinking also about the potential for virality, is that even a word, of the thing. So, you know, what the thumbnail's going to look like,
Yeah.
and what kind of an image uh, in a thumbnail is gonna do the job the best in as far as getting people to watch it who would be receptive to those ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that a little bit in the work. Honestly, thumbnails are one of my favorite parts of a lot of the videos, because sometimes I like to just put up a thumbnail that has nothing to do with what's going on. I think for the first animated one I did for YouTube, or the first animated one in the Freedom Tune series, how government works, I just took a picture. I found a picture online of like the United States government structure, and then I just put a middle finger in front of it, and like that's what I uploaded. And but that might have been a mistake, because I think only like the really hardcore like anarchists were willing to share it at that point. Like some of the, more fluffy, I guess you might call it, marshmallow libertarians, as I call them, like the constitutionalists who kind of want to get along with people, that were probably way more reluctant to share the video. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's still,
Yeah, there's definitely this thing about preaching to the choir, right? And
yeah.
part of what I'm trying to do in Georgia to help, and the others in that series, is to do as much as I can to not alienate people, pretty much.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and the yeah, and the titles of all three of them actually follow kind of a theme that's related to that. So it's um, the titles come from statements that could be made by supporters of the state,
Yeah.
and of course the video tries to explore those ideas, but I hope at least not to not to alienate people straight away.
Mhm.
Maybe the alienation comes partway through. But yeah, so the design of the titles is also an important part of that. Yeah.
No, I could definitely see that. Like with George Ought to Help, obviously that's and You Can Always Leave. I didn't even notice that until you said it, but those are all statist arguments. But I think you do a really good job easing people into it. You're not really being rude to your audience in the same way that I may sometimes be, and I think that you're really, it just feels more educational, and in a good way too. Like it really feels like you walk away learning something in particular, and I think that's especially really good for spreading the belief system that we have. I hate to call it a belief system, but in many ways, it kind of is. And I guess, and this could be an interesting topic to discuss, how there's like two types of libertarianism, in the same way that there's like two kinds of atheism, they say, where it's like implicit and explicit. Like, I don't believe in God versus I believe there's no God and I'm militant. And I think there's the same thing with libertarianism. Like, I don't believe in markets, or I'm sorry, I don't believe in government versus I passionately believe in markets. And I think it's the people who like say I passionately believe in markets, who are really always fighting for and talking about it. And I consider myself to be one of those people who's a little bit obnoxious about how much I believe people can deal with themselves with freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could even add a third category, or maybe it overlaps. There's that idea of hating the state, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've forgotten who it was who said it, but like maybe it was Rothbard chastising someone for not hating the state enough. Like that's another dimension to it, right? Like you can have faith in, you can believe in markets,
Mm-hmm.
and next to that you can also hate the state, like it's a separate dimension.
Exactly.
I guess I don't have that so much. The hatred.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you don't seem like a hateful guy. You don't come off as like a really angry, hateful person in any capacity. I hate to tell you.
No, oh shucks. Yeah, what I was just thinking about is that, like, with regards to what the optimum approach is with regards to getting people to consider these things who haven't looked at them before. Thinking back to what had that effect on me, it wasn't a very gentle, seductive kind of piece of propaganda at all. It was very uncompromising, put you in an uncomfortable position.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of an interesting thing I just thought of. That, that what I'm trying to make is not the kind of media that persuaded me. So maybe I'm doing it wrong in that sense, but I don't know, it seems to be going okay so far.
No, it seems to be going okay for you. I mean, you have definitely an insane amount of views, and people are definitely giving you some good support on Patreon and everything. So, I mean, you're obviously doing something right. I would also say that there is an interesting topic there about artists and multimedia professionals, whatever you would say. What's that? Oh, is this your Patreon? Yeah, everyone, check out his Patreon. Check out his Patreon. He's got some good stuff there, and throw money. Throw him a couple bucks, folks. Throw me a couple bucks too. Patreon.com/FreedomTunes. But no, there's something interesting you said about the kind of content you're creating not necessarily being what would persuade you. And something I was thinking about a couple weeks ago, I shouldn't even say a couple weeks ago, but something I've been thinking about for a long time, but really came back into my mind a few weeks ago, is that sometimes as artists, I hate calling myself that, but someone who creates visual media, I feel that the type of things I make are not necessarily the types of things I would watch. I kind of try to make something that will be entertaining for people or that people will enjoy, but I don't necessarily know that it's something I would enjoy if I hadn't made it, like if someone else had showed it to me. And
Yeah,
do you ever feel that way? Like you're watching something that you really like on television, and you're like, this is nothing like my work, and that's fine, but am I designing for people besides myself? You wonder what the psychology is.
yeah, it kind of shows up that you're in kind of a difficult position. Like I used to do, like my educational background is in painting, and
Okay.
I have this bunch of paintings that kind of left over from when I graduated, and they're not things that I would ever put up in the place that I lived. And yeah, and it's a similar thing, I guess. So yeah, you're in a situation where you're kind of second guessing. You're not even making stuff for yourself. I often kind of think that I am, but it's not really true.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get what you mean. That is such a it is such a weird thing to think about. Well, who am I making it for? I mean, obviously you make it for your audience, but your audience isn't sitting inside your head giving you advice as you're producing it. That's all you. It's almost like how they say human beings, we kind of take on separate personalities when we do separate things. It could just be a case of that. This is my animating personality. This is my writing personality. This is my voice acting personality. Speaking
Yeah, I
of,
think it definitely works like that.
yeah,
Well, yeah, and it brings us on to stuff that you can do to kind of mitigate that problematic situation you end up in. But one of the things, so you can always leave that video that I made is kind of based pretty much exclusively around what people had said, sometimes literally said in comments in response to Josh's help. So in that case, I had much more of a concrete kind of anchor to kind of hang on to as far as who is my target audience
Yeah.
and what are they thinking about. So I let that guide the production of that one pretty much entirely. I think that was helpful.
well, that's actually really funny that you should. I mean, it's like you're completely trolling the people in the comments who are trolling your video. Like, I'm gonna name my video after your comment, after your completely negative comment. That's hilarious. Do
I
you
tried to do it in a respectful way as possible. I removed all the name calling.
Yeah, I'm trolling you in a respectful way.
That's even worse. Isn't it?
It's way worse. Do you so speaking of how I mentioned like the different personalities for the different aspects, do you do your own voice acting or who do you have as voice actors? I'm curious about that. People often ask me about that kind of thing and
A few different people. So I did the skeleton in You Can Always Leave.
nice, nice.
But it's not something I feel I'm particularly good at. A guy called Jim Turberts did the voice of Jeff in You Can Always Leave. He's responsible for the you'll get a beating.
You'll get a beating to tell him thank you because
That was his idea. I think it's brilliant.
yeah, I found that
and,
hysterical.
Yeah, a lady called Jay Tan is the voice for the cloud. She's been doing that since she's done all three in that series.
Oh.
I think that's it for the voice acting. I think it's just there's just been 3 voices so far.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Okay. Yeah, well, it's like I said, the audio comes through really clear in all the videos, and like I said, there is again a different tone, sort of a lot of professionalism and design. And you mentioned that you're a painter, so I actually imagine that's kind of how that worked in. You mentioned something that surprised me earlier. You said that George Oughta Help was actually your first animated video that you ever did.
Yeah. So it was in the evenings after doing my development work that I was the thing I was working on kind of simultaneously with trying to teach myself how After Effects works. So and it took a long time. I can't remember exactly how long, but much longer than it should have.
No such thing with animation. Nothing takes longer than it should have. It all takes just a really long time.
Yeah. I think maybe this. In fact, speaking about animation, I think there's probably some information missing out there about what fundamental information that people wanting to get into it about what the different fields within animation are. Like, back then I had a concept, of course, of there's 3D animation, and then there's 2D stuff. But within 2D animation, there are so many different approaches you can take.
Oh yeah.
Only now I'm kind of feeling like I'm getting a handle on that. And back then I was just doing something without any awareness of how it fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of stuff could be really helpful, I think, for people starting out. With regards to how they choose to focus their time. Are you going to do limited animation, which I think makes a lot of sense, or are you going to try and do the Disney-esque feature film style stuff? No, you're not.
No. More power to you if you're capable, but it's going to take you like 2 years to get a short video out if you take that method. I know that you mentioned After Effects. Is that your primary animation software?
It's the one I use most often. I composite everything in After Effects, but right now I'm using TV Paint a lot.
Okay.
I use that for so the most recent thing I published at the moment is this really short Bitcoin thing, based on an excerpt from one of Roger Ver's speeches about how Bitcoin undermines the ability of the state to wage war through printing money. So that one has this kind of hand-drawn, kind of semi-traditional media look to it.
So that's a new thing for you.
Yeah, it's something I wanted to try out, and it's something that relates more closely to the kind of images I produce using physical media, so the stuff I would paint or the doodles I make. So in a way, that feels. It feels nice to do, and it feels like there's more of my handwriting in there than the vector-looking stuff like George.
I get exactly what you mean. I think that I'm a basic bitch. I use Flash. Little bit of Toon Boom sometimes, but I prefer Flash. And I think for everyone, one thing everyone asks when they're interested in learning animation is what software do you use? I think my answer is it doesn't matter. I mean, I won't even tell people what I use sometimes because that puts it in their mind. If I use this software, I'll make videos like his. No, it's completely about the artist. To me, that's like reading a really great paper and saying, did you type this off in Microsoft Word or did you use Notepad or did you use some other word processing software? It doesn't matter. It does not matter what I used. It's about your abilities in developing those in any software. But
it's true. I have to side somewhat with the people who ask that because I ask it myself, and it's like I think asking that doesn't have to mean kind of ignoring the huge role that all that stuff plays. For me, it's like, okay, we all know that your vision, blah blah blah, your experience is going to be the main determining factor. Next to that, you have to kind of push pixels around and what you're going to use to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah.
No, I
know what you mean.
No, I'm sorry. No. I get what you mean. I think where that question is most important though is when you're asking like, is this vector based or is this hand drawn? I think is something that can suffice because for example, this stuff you did in After Effects for George Oughta Help, like it's obviously vector based. You design all the different shapes, put them together. Instead of what you just did recently, which I'm looking forward to see, which is all hand drawn, and I think that's probably a far more important question because some people I think once you really get into a field, you take for granted your knowledge in that field, and you just assume people outside know the difference between these things. And very oftentimes they'll look at you like you're speaking in Chinese when they're uninitiated, and you try to have this conversation with them. Unless they're Chinese, then they look at you like you're speaking English. Um, but yeah, anything else about your work that you want to get out there before we move on to another topic?
Let's see. Yeah, so I'm busy with this what's turned into a three-part animation series on Bitcoin called Bitcoin for the Intelligent Layperson. It's taking me a while, much longer than I wanted.
Always does, man.
It always does, but this one even more so. But I'm really happy with that. I'm excited for people to see the first installment of that.
I'm excited to see it, man.
Yeah, I like it. What else? Yeah, and, oh yeah. So next to the video stuff, I'm busy working with a colleague of mine who's sat right in front of me there on a video game.
Nice.
It's a local multiplayer abstract racing thing called Cello. Yeah, and that's through that and through a couple of other projects. That's what's gotten me more interested in video games in general.
Yeah.
What happens in that culture?
Well, I'm glad you brought up video games, because that would make for a smooth transition if I didn't want to plug my shit first. But I do want to mention, yeah, again, your website. By the way, do you have a website? I should know this. I know your YouTube channel is Bitbutter, but do you have like an actual website where people can find all your work?
I have a website called jojotohelp.com.
That's what
I just collect those 3 videos. But yeah, to be honest, the website I have isn't an important bug right now.
How dare you? All right, well, check out the website anyway, folks at home. You can also check out freedomtunes.com if you're feeling good about yourself. That's tunes spelled like cartoons, not musical tunes. And yeah, check out both of our Patreon pages and help us out there. Anyway, moving on. If you don't want to help libertarian content producers, don't donate. It's fine. You're just killing the movement. But moving on to video games. There was something that you said you wanted to discuss, and which I agree with completely, and it's been a hot topic amongst libertarian circles pretty recently, and that is Gamergate, and that is particularly, in my mind, Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, possibly, if she's still even in the main scene of things anymore, and just this idea that many people out there in special interest groups really want to police and monitor people's expression and how they deal with their free time. So, what are your thoughts? Are you anti-Gamergate? Do you want to make sure there's no more attractive women in video games, Thomas? Is that your opinion?
No.
How did I know? I'm shocked.
Yeah, I think for me it's such a fascinating thing. There are so many questions or ideas involved in it. That's one of them, like this kind of Puritanism, I guess.
Yeah, neo-Puritanism.
I think it is. That's kind of being shown. Thank you.
Yeah, what are these noises, man? Do you have a transformer in there or something? Is Optimus Prime in there?
My neighbor has brought me a beer. Thank you.
What a kind neighbor. My neighbor never brings me beer, not once in my life.
Yeah, so so there's this Puritanism. There's also this. I think it's interesting that it's been revealed to what extent this a very particular group of related ideological positions hold sway over gaming media, especially related to indie games. That this. It's not the case that you can say anything and have some kind of equal shot at being written about. Praised. It's basically corrupt, right?
Absolutely.
And Yeah, and of course it's interesting to me how all these ideas relate to libertarianism and my positions on freedom of association. And that's one of the interesting intersections. Like lately, there's been a lot of talk about block bots. Like there's this blocking program being used on Twitter, which you can, as a Twitter user, you can say, I want my Twitter account to be linked to this block bot somehow, and it will automatically block thousands of Twitter usernames who have been determined by an algorithm to be connected with Gamergate, right?
Okay.
So yeah, you can. It's a way of kind of excluding pro Gamergate people from your Twitter feed, pretty much, with very little effort on your part.
Yeah.
And so I think this is an interesting idea. Like a lot of the people in Gamergate, you know, who think positively about that hashtag, let's say, there's a sentiment that the blacklists are somehow impediments to freedom of speech. These kinds of ideas, or that this is a threat or illegitimate somehow.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah, me too. And you know, this has to be able to happen. It's part of freedom of association, I think.
No, I agree completely. And honestly, I'm fine with that happening. Like, I'm fine with being blocked by some neo-Puritan special interest group on Twitter. I'm fine with them leaving me alone. That's what I wanted in the first place. The problem I have is when they try to go out of their way to either get the government involved or get support from some sort of political lobby to actually force companies to adhere to their standards. That's what bothers me, obviously. And I think that's where it becomes a free speech issue. I mean, since the beginning of modern American entertainment, you've had these special interest groups coming along and saying, you can't say this, you can't say that. And for so long, the stigma was that, well, these were just right-wing Christian groups. But now it's the exact opposite. And that's something people have been saying for years. I know that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, basically stated in a number of interviews that they rarely, since the beginning of the show in 1997, have really ever gotten any complaints from the Christian right. It's mostly been from the left, who claim to be egalitarian and pro-free speech. It's mostly been from the left saying this isn't politically correct. And now we see that manifesting itself in video games. And I think in several ways it's just obviously a power grab. They're trying to censor people's expression where it doesn't agree with like the mainstream feminist opinion. And the scary part is how quickly they're able to shift the burden of proof, because what happened was they got involved in the situation with people like Anita Sarkeesian, who were constantly criticizing gamer culture, and then when gamers had a backlash, when there was a backlash from gamers, they all began saying, it's just video games, it's not a big deal. You're the one who got involved in the first place. That's what we're saying to you, is that it's video games, it's not a big deal, so you shouldn't try to censor us. And then the second we respond to you, now we're the ones making a big deal out of it. So I see them passing the buck there very frequently.
I think the relationship with feminism is also interesting. Like you mentioned mainstream feminism. I think actually, I don't know if it's easy to discern what mainstream feminism is in this context. Like there is the stuff espoused by the people who have these channels, Sarkeesian, etc. But then there are variants of feminism that are held by people who do identify with Gamergate, and that's the
egalitarian feminism?
Egalitarian or equality feminism.
Which I agree with.
Yeah, me too. And so there's a contest about the meaning of that term.
Which
is. And I think that like part of the play of the people who would prefer this to go away is to deny that there is anything legitimately called feminism amongst the people who feel supportive about that.
I can see that. And that's an interesting thing about how elusive terms can become, especially the term feminism. Because one thing I hear a lot from like the really hardcore, and I'm not saying this is representative of most feminists I know, but when you look at like the really hardcore Tumblr feminist, they always say these things like, you can't ever say that women are sexist. I don't care what the dictionary definition of sexist is. You need a power to be sexist or something. And then whenever you criticize feminism, well, look at the dictionary definition of feminism. This is what it says. Well, hold on. I thought you didn't care about dictionary definitions. I thought you cared about how behaviors manifest themselves in the real world. And so I think it could be interesting to try to say, look, you can call yourself a feminist, but you're not one if you really don't care about gender equality. Or we could go the other way and just say feminists in general don't care, but then you might be throwing out the baby with the bathwater in that circumstance, because like we both established, there's a number of egalitarian feminists out there, though they're not as vocal about Gamergate, because again, it's just video games. It's like not a huge deal to a lot of people, and that's part of the problem. But I got into a debate like 2 months ago, and actually there was a friend of mine who's she's Latina, and she's a woman, and she's a minority, which is who the whole feminist community and the entire social justice community claims that they're sticking up for. And I was having a conversation about Gamergate with her, and she mentioned something about how she was pro Gamergate because she didn't think it was up to feminists to be policing men's hobbies. And then this crazy white chick comes out of nowhere, just starts arguing with us. And when my friend was like, no, I don't feel oppressed by the white man in this circumstance, this girl says, but you are. Like, you don't realize it, but you're being oppressed right now. Like, I'm going to come in here and tell you. And so I think that's another huge issue with it, is we're going to tell people when they're being oppressed so that we can deter other people's behavior. I mean, it's so insane to me.
Yeah, this is always up the sleeve. This is kind of idea of this, crypto misogynists, like you.
Yes.
You hate women, but you don't know it.
Yeah. Yep.
And we're going to tell you about that. It's interesting, and including women themselves who are accused of internalizing.
That's what she said. She said some of the worst sexism comes from women, so that's why your opinion's invalid. That's what she said. But it's when you're arguing with someone, I find that the best tactic to use is you just throw that shit back at them. And it sounds kind of brutal because it upsets them, but for the rest of the conversation, I just kept saying to her, well, you've internalized misogyny. Like, you don't understand. You're fighting for the white man. Like, you throw that shit at them over and over again until they can't have a discussion with you. But I think a lot of this whole thing comes from double standards, in that there are some things we allow men to do and don't get mad at them for. There's some things we allow women to do and don't get mad at them for, which we would be livid if the opposite sex had done it. For example, there's the whole cliche about guys being cool when they sleep around versus girls being sluts when they sleep around. But I also noticed that one thing women are kind of allowed to get away with that men aren't is, I feel like people are way more acceptable when women complain about uncomfortability or like nag their significant other or something along those lines. Where if a guy does it, we would more or less ridicule him or tell him he's being emotionally abusive or something. And I could see, I could see that manifesting itself into this entire subculture. And when you look at something like Gamergate, you have kind of women who are used to their entire life getting away with being vocal about whenever they're uncomfortable. Which, it's good to be vocal when you're uncomfortable. But the problem is, when you expect strangers to change their behavior to make you more comfortable when they're not even interacting with you, you've gone too far. And that's how I see it. Like, if you had a group of men who said, we're uncomfortable about women's fashion magazines, people would say, well, then don't buy them. You know, who cares? So I think part of this...
There's a difference between, like saying you're uncomfortable and explaining why, and giving people that information. Which they can choose to use to make life easier for you. You know, if it doesn't cost them too much to do it.
Yeah.
There's a difference between that and kind of acting as if you have a right to your feelings not being hurt.
Yeah, which is bullshit, but which the left is fine with people thinking.
Yeah, I think in general there's like amongst people arguing these kinds of things, I think there's a lack of interest in truth, consistency. And reason in general. I think that like the rhetoric that goes along with it is just means that it's not seen any part of not logical building blocks or anything like that. It's just what you have to say to get your way. And if you have the right ideology, then everything's justified in getting there. It's not kind of attempt to validate it or establish some kind of consistency.
Now, where do you think that comes from, personally? I mean, what's your opinion on where that develops, why people behave in that way?
I don't know. What do you think? I think you have a thought on that.
No, I'm genuinely curious as to what you would think. I mean, I don't.
I think, well, part of it comes from, I think, like a culture of wanting to be kind to people excessively. I mean, people, like shielding people from the discomfort of having their ideas challenged. I think this is a serious. I think things like debating. I think it's a really good thing. I think that these things should be kind of encouraged or stimulated somehow.
Yeah.
I just think in general this kind of people's capacities for argumentation in general are kind of weak and need to be strengthened.
Yeah.
And I think the internet is pretty good for that. It can be.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
So I don't know which direction I think it's going. Yeah, I don't really know.
No, I definitely agree with what you're saying, and I think the internet strengthens a lot of people's ability to debate and argue. It definitely made me better at it. I hate to say it, but for a while I totally was that guy who would just get in debates on the internet. Sometimes that helps you, though. Sometimes that helps you. I mean, that really does help you strengthen your points when you challenge yourself. If you sit there and say no one's allowed to disagree with me, you're really only hurting yourself. But one thing I've always thought about is that before we had this idea of political correctness, we had this idea of politeness. You were just polite to people, but people understood that in a polite circumstances, there were three things you couldn't discuss: sex, politics, and religion. Because to have a meaningful discussion on any of those topics, you have to be impolite, because you have to disagree with people, you have to tell them their core beliefs are incorrect, you have to assert why yours are correct, you have to try to come out on top, which is inherently impolite. What people have done with...
It's civil, though.
It's civil.
Civility.
Yeah, exactly. There's supposed to be a certain level of civility that you maintain. But I think the issue with political correctness is it takes this idea of politeness and applies it to meaningful discussions such as sex, politics, and religion. So people have to be worried about offending someone else when discussing those things. And obviously that discussion becomes meaningless when you're worrying about offending somebody. If you all want to walk away holding hands, patting each other on the back, you're not going to have a meaningful conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think in general we need to care less about each other's feels.
Yeah. I feel like... No, yeah, definitely. There's certain areas we need to care more. It's so bizarre. Like, there's some areas where we just don't give a rat's ass about people, but then, like, when it comes to their feelings, we're like, but hold on a second. Like, we can't offend this guy.
Yeah, I guess I should nuance that a little bit. I don't mean there's also a difference between gratuitously trying to hurt someone and doing something that you think is important, which as a side effect might hurt someone.
That's very true. It's all about sincerity, right? I mean, if you say something that happens to hurt someone, you have to, but you shouldn't go out of your way to do it. You know, people have to trust that you're not just doing this to be an asshole, that you really do want to enlighten someone in some way. Which I usually just do it to be an asshole. I'll be honest. It's just who I am. But
at least people know that about you.
Most people know that about me. Like, he's just an asshole. He doesn't count. He doesn't count. He'll go make his cartoons. But yeah, man, it's been a great conversation. I know you said you had something to do in a little while, and I don't want to keep you too long. I gotta get to class. I'm late for class. I don't care. Like I said, I'm an asshole. It's no big deal. But yes, it's been a great conversation. Everyone, this is the great Thomasz Kaye, and he makes, like we mentioned, amazing animations. Check him out. Sponsor his Patreon page, because he makes really, really good shit. And if you really want to help us creative folks in the libertarian movement, you buck up, folks. But in all seriousness, thank you very much for the interview. I was glad I got a chance to pick your brain and talk with you. If there's any closing thoughts that you have.
No.
No, none. All right, then. He's saving all of his thoughts for the next animation. Like, they all have to be up in his head. Well, thank you very much, audience, and you all have a nice day. Spread liberty, throw Molotov cocktails at store windows. I mean, don't do that. People aren't supposed to know that's our real intention. Be civil in your discussions. That's the point of today's podcast. Be civil when you argue, and have a good day, folks.
Not the lights. Yeah.
That's right.